You'll never regret romanticizing your life. Take the smallest moments.
Just a quick disclaimer before I begin. If you are someone who would prefer to read and hear your own voice, that is completely okay. I get it. I am the same way. This will be on my Substack in the description box below. I will have it there for free. No need to pay anything to read this. It will be there. I got you. Don't worry. The self rot of wanting to be beautiful. There's a particular ache that comes with existing in the age of observation, a kind of low humming sickness, the awareness that someone somewhere might be watching. It's almost spiritual, this ache, the ritual of the curated life. We rise in the morning and rehearse authenticity like a prayer. We choose our coffee mug for its color palette, our sadness for its lighting, our joy for its resonance with an audience we cannot see but always feel. The modern self does not exist in solitude, it exists in performance. We are performers of our own lives, narrators trapped inside frames, dressing every moment in the thin gauze of aesthetic coherence. And we call this art. We call it taste, we call it beauty, but beneath the eloquence of these words lies something more corrosive: hunger. Hunger to be adored, the hunger to be understood. I think about that sometimes. The quiet tyranny of the aesthetic, how it seduces us, how it promises transcendence through arrangement. Aesthetic isn't simply about beauty anymore. It's about control, about constructing a world so orderly, so harmonious that the chaos inside us feels briefly tamed. When we say something is aesthetic, what we really mean is it makes my disorder look intentional. We've blurred the lines between meaning and appearance, mistaking style for soul. Once upon a time, art was what we made to express who we were. Now, who we are has become the art itself, every mutable, every marketable, endlessly consumed. There is an exhaustion in that. The exhaustion of being seen but never known. I scroll through feeds that look like shrines, rooms drenched in sunlight, faces bathed in serenity, books unread but perfectly arranged besides teacups and dying flowers. It's not dishonesty, it's devotion. Everyone is worshiping at the altar of their own presentation. The irony is exquisite. We have never been more visible and yet never more invisible in our essence. The aesthetic promises intimacy, but delivers distance. It promises self expression, but demands performance. And the more we try to be beautiful, artful, composed, softly cinematic, the further we drift from the raw, undressed humanity that once made beauty possible in the first place. I think of it like this: we're all standing in front of mirrors that no longer reflect us, they broadcast us. They translate our being into something palatable, consumable, algorithmically elegant. To be aesthetic is to learn the language of visual poetry, but to forget the syntax of sincerity. Somewhere between the filters and the framing, we misplaced our pulse, and now we spend hours, days, even years trying to curate our way back into it. But here's the cruelest twist: the aesthetic doesn't simply decorate our lives, it redefines the meaning of living altogether. We no longer just want to experience beauty, we want to embody it, to become it, to live as if the world were watching and our lives were the exposition. It's tragic, really, because in the pursuit of aesthetic perfection, we have made beauty a currency and authenticity a luxury we can no longer afford. There was a time, not long ago, when a moment was enough. When the sunlight hit your face and that was the entire story. When a laugh didn't need to be recorded to be remembered, when existence was not a brand. But now the moment doesn't exist unless it's seen. We are living inside an endless gallery of our own creation, constantly repainting, repositioning, reframing, hoping someone will stop long enough to feel what we felt when we made it. And that's the struggle, isn't it? To exist in a world that rewards performance more than presence, to crave meaning in an era that values mood boards more than memories, to yearn for art, when what we really want is to be loved for what we didn't have to construct. This, all of this, is the struggle of wanting to be aesthetic, the struggle of wanting to be beautiful in a world that no longer believes in beauty unless it can be captured. The illusion of authenticity, that shimmering, impossible thing. We say it, we crave it, we post about it, we beg for it in others, but what we call authenticity now is often just performance disguised as transparency. We have made confession into content, vulnerability into aesthetic, pain into something that must first look good to be believed. There's something disturbingly poetic about that. The idea that even our honesty must be edited. We share our sadness in lowercase captions, whisper our truths through grainy filters, document our grief with cinematic melancholy, and call it healing. But authenticity in this new world is never raw, it's rehearsed. We have learned to polish our pain until it glimmers, just enough to be palatable, just enough to seem real without ever threatening comfort. Because real pain, the kind that ruptures, the kind that is unphotogenic, the kind that doesn't look like art, terrifies us. It's too loud, too chaotic, too unbranded. So instead, we perform realness. We cry beautifully in well lit bathrooms. We speak our traumas in well timed pauses, our voices trembling just so. We record our breakdowns, edit them to music, and then capture them with poetry we never read that softens the blow. And we call that truth. But it's not truth, it's composition. A modern tragedy of our own design, this constant self awareness that corrupts every moment we try to live. Even when no one is watching, we have internalized the gaze. We are the audience, the actor, the director, and the critic of our own existence, exhausted by the multiplicity of our roles and yet addicted to the illusion of a control that it gives us. I sometimes wonder if this obsession with authenticity is simply the body's rebellion against the artificial. We've been so drenched in stimulation, so flooded with images of what life should look like, that our souls have begun clawing at the walls, begging for something real. But even our rebellion has been commodified. The word raw has become a brand. The word honest is an aesthetic choice. Even imperfection has a color palette now. There's this trend, I call it curated imperfection. I think that's a good name for it. Photos of messy beds, chipped nail polish, blurry selfies. They look unfiltered, but they're not. They're staged in fragments of chaos, an orchestrated kind of disarray that whispers, I am real, I swear. We've learned how to fake the unfiltered. What's left after that? Even the raw feels rehearsed. Where does truth go to breathe? Does it have a space? We claim we're being vulnerable, but vulnerability, true vulnerability, doesn't exist under lens of performance. It exists in the silence after the camera stops rolling. It exists in the things we choose not to post, in the faces we make when no one's watching, the ones that don't fit into the narrative. But we've become estranged from those versions of ourselves because the moment we recognize beauty, we reach for our phones. The moment we feel joy, we translate it into documentation. The moment we grieve, we begin to compose it. We are indeed terrified of being unrecorded, as if a life unseen is a life unlived, as if the private self is somehow less valuable than the public one. But here's the cruelest truth. The more we perform authenticity, the further we drift away from it. Because realness, actual, visceral, inconvenient realness, demands that we surrender control. And that is the one thing our generation refuses to do. We are architects of our image, curators of perception. We know how to stage spontaneity, how to look candid, how to make eye contact with the viewer through a lens that has never known intimacy. Even our laughter has become stylized. We rehearse what joy should look like until we can no longer recognize what it feels like. And somewhere between that care for a performance, a strange emptiness grows because the applause never sounds quite as loud as the silence that follows it. I think that's why so many of us are perpetually exhausted, not from living, but from appearing alive, from maintaining the illusion that we're effortlessly human while slowly becoming digital ghosts of our former selves. The illusion of authenticity is the greatest paradox of our time. We are simultaneously overexposed and unseen. It's a contradictory, but it's the truth. The world knows our faces, our playlists, our morning routines, our heartbeats, but it does not know us because we don't even know us. We only know the versions of ourselves that photograph well. And when the camera is gone, when there's no one left to witness, to scroll, to validate, we collapse back into something shapeless, unsure, a creature that no longer remembers how to exist without documenting it. The illusion of authenticity is not a glitch in the system, it is the system. A system built to keep us performing, consuming, uploading, and comparing, forever searching for the version of ourselves that finally feels real. But the truth is, there is no version. There's only the living, breathing contradiction of who you already are. And maybe that's the one thing we've all forgotten. That being real, it's not something you show, it's something you are, even when no one is watching. The emotional weight. There's a certain exhaustion that comes with trying to be beautiful all of the time. Not just in appearance, but in essence. It's not the same as vanity. Vanity at least admits its desire to be seen. This is something quieter, heavier, more insidious. The emotional gravity of curating an identity that feels seamless. You start to notice how your existence becomes a series of deliberate gestures. The way you hold your coffee, the way sunlight spills over your desk, the way your reflection appears in windows, not mirrors, windows, because you've trained yourself to see life as composition. Every moment becomes potential content, every feeling becomes a prop. And though it may look graceful, delicate even, it is a performance, stitched with invisible tension. There's a kind of emotional tax you pay for maintaining the illusion of ease. The irony is, the more effortless you appear, the more effort it requires. You start to curate your sadness. It's soft around the edges, heartbreak that's cinematic rather than chaotic. Even your suffering must have aesthetic value. It's an emotional calculus few people talk about. How much of my humanity can I afford to show before it becomes unmarketable? How raw can my truth be before it makes people uncomfortable? The aesthetic life teaches you to package pain like perfume, something intoxicating, not offensive. You distill a heartbreak into a quote, loneliness into a playlist, exhaustion into a candlelit photo caption healing. We've learned to romanticize our wounds because society finds beauty easier to digest than brutality. But the weight of it builds quietly, like sediment. At first, it's the small things, retaking a photo because the coffee foam looked wrong, rearranging your desk to appear lived in but not messy. Then it's larger, forcing yourself to read poetry you don't like because it fits your aesthetic, wearing your melancholy like jewelry because people find it alluring. You begin to measure your worth by how cohesively you exist. And when the mask slips, when you are caught being ordinary, uncurated, unphotogenic, the shame feels disproportionate, violent almost. Because suddenly, the person behind the image feels like a failure. We are creatures built to express, but the modern self has learned to perform instead. And performance, no matter how beautiful, is a kind of labor. The exhaustion comes not from what we show, but from what we conceal. Because no matter how effortless your aesthetic may appear, it takes constant vigilance to prevent the chaos of your real self from bleeding through. You start to split, right down the middle. There's the version of you that lives, and the version that's witnessed. One is messy, flawed, fluid. The other is clean, poetic, understandable. And slowly, the emotional weight of maintaining both becomes unbearable. It's like dragging around a sculpture of yourself. One carved from your best angles, your most flattering words. You carry it everywhere. You polish it daily, you let people admire it. And then late at night, when the applause of validation fades, you look at it and realize it's heavier than you are. And that's the part no one warned you about. That beauty can suffocate. That elegance can rot. That perfection, once worshipped, begins to consume the one who built it. The aesthetic, once meant to free you, becomes a cage disguised as gallery. You look flawless inside of it, yes, but you are not free. There is nothing light about living beautifully. It's an art form of restraint, of suppression, of exhaustion made invisible. And what's worse, it becomes addictive because being adored for the mask feels safer than being dismissed for the truth. So you keep polishing, you keep performing, until one day you forget you were ever something before the aesthetic, before the quiet choreography of effortless. It is not vanity, it is self preservation. But God, it's heavy. The economics of beauty. Beauty, once a language of art and instinct, has become a ledger. It accrues interest, fluctuates in value, and circulates through invisible markets of perception. What was once a gift, something ephemeral, uncontrollable, divine, is now a system of exchange. We are all investors in our own image. The modern world has made beauty quantifiable. Likes, follows, engagement, they're all forms of social capital that mimic the mechanics of finance. Aesthetics have turned into economy, identity into brand. Your face becomes a portfolio, your body a business card, your taste a currency of belonging. We don't just exist anymore, we yield returns. And the tragedy of it all is how naturally we've accepted it. There's no grand rebellion against the system, only quiet participation. We pretend we are free from its reach, even as we subconsciously arrange ourselves to be desirable, legible, profitable. The digital landscape has turned selfhood into real estate. Every profile, every post, every image is a property you maintain, decorated, renovated, optimized for visibility. You pay your rent with relevance. And when the algorithm shifts, it feels like an earthquake, sudden, merciless, displacing your worth with a single update. We speak often of beauty standards, but rarely of beauty economies. Because to admit that beauty functions as a currency is to admit that the market decides your value and not your heart. Not your character, not even your art, but your ability to be consumed. And consumption, unlike appreciation, requires no love. We have commodified ourselves in the name of self expression. We've mistaken exposure for intimacy, visibility for validation. We tell ourselves we're sharing, but really we're selling. Each image, each curated moment is an unspoken transaction between the viewer's desire and the subject's need to be desired. Beauty then becomes labor, invisible, unpaid if you don't have enough followers, and endless. It demands maintenance, investment, emotional bandwidth. It asks you to treat your existence like a small business, one that must constantly reinvent itself to remain desirable. You become both the product and the advertisement, smiling, shimmering, surviving, and yet there's something almost poetic about it. How human it is to chase loneliness, even when it hurts. To want to be admired is to want to be seen. To be seen is to exist. In that way, maybe this entire economy was born from loneliness. Because attention, no matter how shallow, mimics love just enough to soothe us. We trade our authenticity for applause, our stillness for relevance, our peace for perception. And for a fleeting moment, when the metrics rise, it feels worth it. But economies are cruel gods. They do not reward vulnerability, they exploit you. They do not cherish you, they consume you. You start to realize that your image has outperformed your reality. That version of you people admire is not the one who wakes up disoriented, who forgets to eat, who has dreams too obscure to fit in a caption. And yet, that version, the marketable you, earns attention, validation, sometimes even opportunity. It becomes hard not to prioritize it, so you begin to invest more into it. You learn to package your sadness aesthetically, to intellectualize your fatigue, to rebrand your insecurity as relatability, because even pain has a profit margin now. The economy of beauty has no exit strategy. You cannot opt out, only fluctuate between exhaustion and exhibition, and the cruelest irony. You begin to envy the very illusion you've built. You look at your online self, elegant, composed, luminous, and feel small in comparison. The brand becomes bigger than the person, your image becomes your inheritance. And somewhere, quietly, you start to wonder if being beautiful was ever the goal at all, or if it was simply the only language the world listened to. Reclaiming the aesthetic. There comes a moment, often quiet, almost imperceptible, when the exhaustion gives way to revelation. When the constant performance, the endless curation, the sickly sweet hunger to be admired begins to rot. And in that decay, something holy emerges. A craving not to appear beautiful, but to feel alive again. That is where reclamation begins, because the aesthetic was never the enemy. It was always the misuse, the distortion, the monetization, the dismembering of beauty into something transactional. But beauty, in its purest form, has always been a rebellion. To reclaim the aesthetic is to remember that beauty is not a performance, but a presence. It is the curve of your spine when you breathe without posing. It is the flicker of a candlelight over chipped porcelain. It is the tenderness of existing without witness. We have been taught to externalize beauty, to turn it outward, to feed it to the world's appetite. But the truer act of creation is internal, to cultivate a sense of wonder that exists even when no one else is watching. When you reclaim an aesthetic, you strip it of its capitalism, its vanity, you return it to ritual. You stop performing softness and begin living it. You stop seeking perfection in the frame and begin finding it in the feeling. Reclamation is an unlearning, a refusal to be ornamental. It is a realization that not everything worth loving needs to be photographed, that not every sunrise needs to become a screensaver, that the essence of beauty was never in the image but in the experience of seeing. To reclaim the aesthetic is to make beauty private again, to make it sacred. to make it something that cannot be bought or sold or algorithmically approved, you begin to see beauty as communion instead of consumption, a language between you and the world, not a currency between you and the crowd. You start lighting candles not just for ambiance but for prayer. You start dressing beautifully not for perception but for reverence because you are alive. And that in itself is a reason to adorn yourself. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to forgive yourself for once believing that beauty required permission. Reclaiming an aesthetic or the aesthetic means allowing your surroundings, your art, yourself to be incomplete. It means finding poetry in imperfection again, chipped paint, unmade beds, ink stained fingers, overgrown plants. It means that aestheticism, when reclaimed, is not about control. It's about connection. You start to create not for the archive, but for the soul. You start to see art in the mundane again, the quiet clanking of a teaspoon, the rhythm of footsteps in the rain, the half finished sentence on a page. You stop dressing your wounds for display and start tending them in solitude. Reclamation is a radical softness. It's saying, I am not a brand, I am a being. It's stepping away from the camera long enough to remember what your own silence sounds like. And in that stillness, you might realize that the aesthetic, when freed from performance, was never superficial. It was a language. It was how your soul spoke when words failed. It was how you made sense of existence in a world too loud, too cruel, too quick to consume. The aesthetic was never the cage. It was the key. We simply forgot how to use it. So reclaim it, repaint it, rewrite it, wear it like armor, whisper it like a prayer, but let it belong to you again. Let beauty be something you live, not something you prove. Because in the end, the truest aesthetic is not found on the screen or in the mirror. It's found in the way you inhabit your own life when no one is looking. So what now? Maybe the point was never to be aesthetically pleasing at all. Maybe the point was to learn how to live beautifully, even when beauty forgets your name. There's something haunting about realizing how much of our lives have been staged. How many mornings we've turned into backdrops, how many nights we filtered into nostalgia before they even ended. We learned to make memories marketable, to dress our grief in soft lighting, to turn our yearning into digestible captions. And yet beneath all that, beneath the choreography, the performance, the relentless need to appear put together, there's something human trembling quietly in the dark. Something unedited, unbranded, the version of you that doesn't exist for anyone's consumption. Maybe she's sitting in her kitchen at 3 a.m. eating cold leftovers straight from the container. Maybe he's driving nowhere with the music too loud, screaming lyrics he doesn't even like just to feel something rattle in his chest. Maybe it's that small unphotographed moment where you looked up from your phone and realized the sunset was already gone. That's the real thing, isn't it? The flicker of life that exists before the urge to capture it. That split second of being so raw, so unsellable, so real that it almost hurts to let it pass unrecorded. We keep chasing permanence in a world built on vanishing. But maybe beauty was never meant to last. Maybe it's supposed to move through us like weather, unpredictable, fleeting, divine. Maybe our obsession with preservation is what keeps us from experiencing it fully. Because the truth is, nothing truly beautiful survives being possessed. Not people, not moments, not art. We lose so much of life trying to make it last. We lose the present by trying to frame it. We lose ourselves by trying to be understood. And maybe it's okay if no one understands you entirely. Maybe it's okay if your beauty is not universal, if your softness is not symmetrical, if your life does not photograph well. Maybe that's the most radical act in a world that thrives on visibility. Is to be unseen, to live quietly, to love quietly, to create without announcing it, to just let your joy exist without documentation. There's something intoxicating about being untraceable again, about living like art no one can own, about existing without explanation, without audience, without angles. Because one day, when everything else has been archived, deleted, or forgotten, when algorithms have shifted and screens have gone dark, you will still have your small rituals of beauty. Your cup of tea cooling beside an open book that you're reading, your reflection in the window just before dawn, your laughter, unrecorded, unrepeatable, utterly human. And maybe that is enough. Maybe maybe that's what the aesthetic was trying to tell us all along. That the most exquisite form of beauty is simply the act of being here, uncurated, unfiltered, alive. If these are indeed conversations that you are interested in having, perhaps my content will be of some interest to you, whether it's my YouTube channel, my Substack, my TikTok, or my Instagram. Those are all that I use. Maybe check it out. I don't know if that's what you decide to do. Even just to look, you don't have to follow or subscribe or anything. Just you listening means a lot to me.